She woke in chains, starving and forgotten. He walked in like fate itself. What happened next shattered an entire kingdom. Welcome to a story of survival, power, and an impossible bond forged in blood and fire. This is the tale of a captive who became a queen, not through mercy, but through sheer, unbreakable will. Stay until the end to see how one decision changed everything. Drop a like, comment your city, and let's begin. The cold came first. Not the wind, not the darkness. The cold, crawling up through the stone floor, sinking into bone, turning skin numb and useless. Kaela Thorne had stopped shivering 2 days ago. That was when she knew her body had started giving up. She sat slumped against the wall, wrists raw from the iron cuffs bolted into the rock. Her breath came shallow. Her ribs pressed sharp against her tunic, each breath a reminder of how little she'd eaten, how little there was left of her. Somewhere above, beyond the thick mountain stone, the world kept turning. Down here, time had stopped. She'd lost count of the days, maybe 6, maybe 10. It didn't matter anymore. The cell was small, barely 10 feet across. The walls were rough-cut stone, dark with moisture and age. There was no bed, no blanket, just the floor, the chains, and a bucket in the corner that reeked of despair. A thin shaft of light filtered down from somewhere high above, too far to reach, too weak to warm. Kaela closed her eyes and tried to remember what warmth felt like. Sunlight on her face, the smell of pine trees after rain. Her mother's voice calling her home across the meadow, that particular lilt that meant dinner was ready and the world was safe. But the memories felt thin now, like smoke slipping through her fingers, like something that had happened to someone else in another life. This fortress was built to break people. She could feel it in the walls, ancient, brutal, soaked in the suffering of everyone who'd come before. How many others had died in this cell? How many had begged, screamed, or wept until their voices gave out? She hadn't done any of that. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. If they wanted her broken, they'd have to kill her first. The door groaned open. The sound was so sudden, so loud in the silence that Kaela's heart lurched. Her eyes snapped up, pulse hammering in her throat. Torchlight flooded the cell, harsh and blinding after so much darkness. She squinted, blinking hard, her vision swimming as it tried to adjust. A figure stepped inside. Not a guard. She'd seen guards before, brutish men with dead eyes who shoved food through the slot and didn't speak. This was different. The air itself seemed to shift when he entered, growing heavier, charged with something she didn't have a name for. The man who walked into her cell was tall, easily over 6 feet, and built like violence wrapped in flesh, broad shoulders, thick arms, the kind of body that came from years of fighting, not training. He wore dark leather, worn and practical, and moved with the fluid confidence of someone who'd never questioned his right to be anywhere. His face was all hard lines and sharper edges, dark hair, slightly too long, falling across his forehead, a jaw that looked carved from granite, and eyes, pale gray, cold as winter frost, that fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Kaela's stomach dropped. She knew who he was. Everyone knew. Ronan Varric, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, warlord, conqueror, the man who'd carved his rule into the map with blood and steel and ruthless precision. Stories about him traveled farther than his armies, whispered in taverns, snarled in fear, sung in ballads that made him sound half myth, half monster. Some said he'd killed his own father to take the throne. Others claimed he could rip a man's throat out with his bare hands. All of them agreed. You didn't cross Ronan Varric and live to tell about it, and now he was standing in her cell, staring at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Kaela forced herself to sit straighter, though her muscles screamed in protest. Her legs were weak, her head spinning from hunger and exhaustion. But she wouldn't cower. Not for him. Not for anyone. Let him see what he'd bought with his cruelty. Let him see that she wasn't afraid, even if that was a lie. "You're smaller than I expected," Ronan said. His voice was low, measured, with a rough edge that suggested he didn't waste words often. Not cruel exactly, just observing, like she was a problem he was trying to solve. Kaela didn't answer. She just stared back, jaw tight, refusing to give him anything. He stepped closer, boots scraping against stone. The torchlight caught the lines of his face, the faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the weariness etched around his eyes. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Good, she thought viciously. I hope you never sleep again. Do you know why you're here? He asked. Because your men dragged me out of my home in the middle of the night, Kaela said, her voice cracking from disuse. Because you take what you want and call it law. Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. You're here because you belong to me. The words hit like a physical blow. Kaela let out a sharp, bitter laugh. It scraped her throat raw. I belong to no one. You do. He crouched in front of her, slow and deliberate, bringing himself to her level. Close enough now that she could see the details. The small nicks on his knuckles, the faint lines around his mouth, the way his eyes weren't quite as cold up close. There was something else there, something almost human. You felt it, haven't you? The pull, the ache, like something's been missing your entire life. Her breath caught. No, he couldn't possibly. But he was right. She had felt it. For months now, maybe longer, she couldn't pinpoint when it started. There'd been this restless, gnawing sensation deep in her chest. Like hunger, but worse. Like being lost even when she knew exactly where she was. Like a compass pointing toward something she couldn't see, couldn't name, couldn't escape. She'd thought she was going mad, thought it was grief over her father's death 2 winters ago, or loneliness from living on the edge of the pack territory, or some sickness she didn't have a name for, but she'd never told anyone. How could he possibly know? You're lying, Kaela said, but her voice wavered, betraying her. I'm not. Ronan's gaze didn't waver. Those pale eyes pinned her in place, unflinching and relentless. It's called a bond. Rare. Unbreakable. Most wolves go their entire lives without finding it. Some don't believe it exists at all. But when it happens... He paused, and something almost vulnerable crossed his face before he locked it away. It doesn't ask permission. Kaela shook her head, harder this time. You kidnapped me. You threw me in a cell. You starved me. You don't get to stand there and call it destiny. I didn't say it was fair, Ronan replied quietly. I said it was real. She wanted to spit at him, wanted to scream until her voice gave out, wanted to claw at his face and make him hurt the way she was hurting, but the exhaustion was too heavy, the hunger too deep, the cold too complete. Instead, she just stared at him, every muscle in her body trembling with rage and something else, something she refused to name. Ronan stood slowly, brushing dust off his knee. You'll be moved to a chamber upstairs. You'll be fed, clothed, and protected. No more chains. And if I refuse, you won't. Try me. He looked at her then, really looked, like he was seeing past the filth and the anger and the defiance to something deeper. And for the first time since he'd walked in, something almost like regret flickered across his face. You don't understand yet, he said quietly. But you will. He turned toward the door. Wait. Ronan stopped, one hand on the frame. He didn't turn around. Kaela swallowed hard, forcing the question out past the knot in her throat. Why me? Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. When he finally spoke, his voice was so low she almost didn't hear it. Because you're the only thing in this world that's ever made me feel anything other than empty. And then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him, leaving her alone in the sudden darkness with nothing but the echo of his words and the frantic pounding of her own heart. They came for her an hour later. 2 guards, different from the ones who'd thrown her in here. These moved with precision, professional and detached. They unlocked the chains without a word, and when Kaela's legs buckled beneath her, one of them caught her elbow. She jerked away, nearly falling. Easy, the guard said. His voice wasn't unkind. You haven't walked in days. Your body needs time. Kaela gritted her teeth and forced herself upright, swaying but standing. She'd crawl out of the cell before she let them carry her. They led her through a maze of corridors, narrow, twisting passages carved directly into the mountain. Torches flickered in iron brackets. The air was cold and damp, smelling of stone and smoke and something metallic she didn't want to think about. Other cells lined the hallway, Most were empty, a few weren't. She saw a man curled in one corner, muttering to himself. Saw a woman pressed against the bars, eyes vacant and staring. Saw things she'd remember later in nightmares. This place ate people alive. And she'd survived it. The realization hit her with unexpected force. She'd survived. Despite everything, despite the cold and the hunger and the certainty that she'd die down here, she was still alive. That had to count for something. They climbed stairs, stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. Kaela's legs burned with every step, her breath coming hard. But she didn't stop, didn't ask for help. Just kept climbing, one foot in front of the other, until finally they emerged into a different world. The upper levels of the fortress were nothing like the dungeons. Here, the ceiling soared overhead, supported by massive wooden beams. Tapestries hung on the walls, faded but intricate, depicting battles and hunts and ancient ceremonies. Windows let in actual daylight, pale and gray, but real. She could see snow on the mountains beyond. The guard stopped in front of a heavy wooden door, banded with iron. One of them pushed it open and stepped aside. "Your chamber," he said simply. Kaela stepped inside and stopped dead. The room was enormous. High ceilings, stone walls softened by tapestries and furs. A bed, an actual bed, piled with blankets and furs that looked thick enough to drown in. A fireplace, already lit, crackling with real warmth. A table with chairs. A wardrobe. A window seat overlooking the mountains. And in the center of the room, steam rising gently into the air, was a copper bathing tub filled with clean water. Kaela's throat tightened. A young woman stood near the tub, barely more than a girl, really, with dark hair braided down her back and nervous eyes. She curtsied quickly, awkwardly. "My name is Mira," she said, voice soft. "I've been assigned to help you. The water's still warm. There are clean clothes in the wardrobe, and I'll bring food once you've had a chance to rest." Kaela just stared at her, unable to process the shift. From chains to this, from darkness to firelight, from dying to what? What was this? "I'll leave you to it," Mira said, backing toward the door. She paused, biting her lip. "I'm sorry for what happened to you. It wasn't right." Then she was gone, closing the door softly behind her. Kaela stood alone in the center of the chamber, fists clenched, trying to make sense of it. This was a cage too, just prettier, just more comfortable, but a cage nonetheless. She crossed to the tub slowly, half expecting it to disappear like a mirage. But it was real. The water warm against her fingertips, smelling faintly of herbs she didn't recognize. Kaela stripped off the filthy tunic, letting it fall to the floor in a heap. She caught sight of herself in a polished metal mirror hanging on the wall and barely recognized the woman staring back. Hollow cheeks, bruised shadows under her eyes, hair matted and tangled, ribs showing through skin that had gone pale from lack of sunlight. She looked like a corpse. Kaela turned away and climbed into the tub, sinking down until the water covered her shoulders. The heat stung at first, almost painful against her cold skin. But slowly, gradually, her muscles began to unclench. The shaking eased. The constant ache in her bones dulled to something bearable. She closed her eyes and let herself drift. Just for a moment, just long enough to remember what it felt like to be warm. Mira returned with food an hour later. By then, Kaela had scrubbed the worst of the grime away and dressed in the clothes left for her, simple but well made. A soft tunic, dark green, pants that actually fit, boots lined with fur. The food was simple too. Bread, still warm, roasted meat that fell apart at the touch of a fork, cheese, apples, a bowl of stew thick with vegetables and something that might have been venison. Kaela ate until her stomach hurt, then immediately regretted it. She wasn't used to this much food anymore. Her body didn't know what to do with it. Mira hovered nearby, refilling her cup, offering more bread, watching with anxious eyes. "That's enough," Kaela said finally, pushing the plate away. "Are you sure? There's more if—" "I'm sure." Mira nodded quickly and began clearing the dishes. Kaela watched her work, noting the way her hands shook slightly, the way she kept glancing toward the door like she expected someone to burst in. "How long have you worked here?" Kaela asked. Mira startled, nearly dropping a plate. 2 years, miss." "Don't call me miss." Sorry, Kaela. My name is Kaela. Mira relaxed slightly. 2 years, she said again. My family. We owed a debt. I came here to work it off. And did you? Work it off? A shadow crossed Mira's face. Not yet. Kaela filed that away. This place ran on debts and power and fear. Good to know. Tell me about him, she said. Ronan. Mira went very still. I don't think I should. I'm not asking for state secrets. Just, what's he like when he's not throwing people in dungeons? Mira bit her lip, clearly torn. Finally, she sighed. He's complicated. Harsh, yes. Ruthless when he needs to be, but he's not cruel for the sake of it. He has rules, laws, and he follows them even when it costs him. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, Mira said quietly. But it's the truth. There are worse men to be bound to. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. So everyone knows, Kaela said flatly, about this bond. Rumors spread quickly here, especially about the king. Mira hesitated. For what it's worth, I think he's trying, in his own way. Kaela let out a humorless laugh. His own way nearly killed me. I know. Mira met her eyes, and for the first time there was steel there beneath the nervousness. But you're still alive. That means something. The days blurred together after that. Kaela didn't see Ronan again. She saw guards, silent, stone-faced men who stood outside her door and refused to answer questions. She saw Mira, who brought food 3 times a day and tried to make small talk that Kaela mostly deflected. But no one told her what was happening. No one explained why she was here, what Ronan wanted, or what came next. So Kaela explored. The chamber had 2 doors. One led to the main corridor where the guards stood watch. The other opened onto a small balcony carved directly into the mountainside. She spent hours out there, breathing the sharp, cold air, watching the world spread out below. This fortress was massive, even bigger than she'd realized. She could see towers jutting up from the rock, their tops disappearing into low clouds, walls thick enough to withstand sieges, courtyards where warriors trained with brutal efficiency, their shouts echoing off stone. The forest stretched endlessly beyond, dark green and forbidding. Somewhere out there was her home, her pack, the life she'd been ripped away from. But it might as well have been on another continent. Getting down from this mountain alone would kill her. Even if she made it to the forest, she had no supplies, no weapons, no idea which direction to go. And winter was coming. She could feel it in the air, taste it on the wind. She was trapped. Not by chains this time, by geography, by circumstance, by the simple, brutal reality that she had nowhere to go. Kaela gripped the stone railing, knuckles white, jaw clenched so hard her teeth ached. She wasn't giving up. She'd survived the cell. She'd survive this too. She just had to be smart, patient, wait for the right moment, and when it came, she'd run. Well, on the 4th day, the door to her chamber opened without warning. Kaela spun around from where she'd been standing by the window, heart leaping into her throat. Ronan stood in the doorway. He looked different tonight, rougher around the edges. His hair was damp, like he'd just come from the training yards. His shirt was unlaced at the collar, revealing the edge of a scar that disappeared beneath the fabric. There was blood on his knuckles, fresh, still wet. He saw her looking and flexed his hand absently. Sparring accident. Looks more like you beat someone senseless, Kaela said. That too. She didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know what to do with him standing there, taking up space in her room like he had every right to be there, which technically he did. This was his fortress, his territory, his world. She was just a prisoner in it. You're planning to run, Ronan said. It wasn't a question. Kaela lifted her chin. Wouldn't you? No. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The sound of the latch clicking made her pulse jump. Running doesn't solve anything. Neither does keeping me prisoner. You're not a prisoner. Then let me leave. I can't. Can't or won't. Both. Kaela let out a sharp breath, frustration boiling over. You don't get to do this. You don't get to rip me out of my life, throw me in a cell, and then act like you're doing me some kind of favor by putting me in a nicer cage. I know. The admission caught her off guard. Ronan crossed the room slowly, stopping near the fireplace. He stared into the flames, his profile sharp in the flickering light. I know what this looks like. I know what you think of me, and I don't blame you. Then why? Because the bond doesn't care, he said, cutting her off. His voice was low, rough, edged with something that might have been anger or might have been desperation. It doesn't care that you hate me. It doesn't care that I took you against your will. It's there, whether we want it or not, and if I let you go, he paused, jaw working, you'd die. The room went very quiet. Kaela's pulse thundered in her ears. What? The bond ties us together, Ronan said, still not looking at her. Physically, spiritually, in ways we don't fully understand. If we're apart too long, it weakens. You'd feel it first, the ache, the sickness. Your body would start shutting down. Then the pain. And eventually, he didn't finish. Didn't need to. Kaela's stomach dropped. You're lying. I wish I was. She searched his face, looking for the crack, the tell, the proof that this was just another manipulation. But all she saw was exhaustion, frustration, and something that looked almost like guilt. I didn't choose this either, Ronan said quietly, finally turning to face her. But it's happening, and we can fight it, or we can survive it. Your choice. Kaela's hands were shaking. She shoved them into her pockets, refusing to let him see. What do you want from me? Time. His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw past the warlord, past the king, to the man underneath, tired, lonely, carrying weight no one should have to bear alone. That's all, just time. For what? To understand, to adjust, to stop looking at me like I'm a monster. You are a monster, Kaela said, but the words came out softer than she intended. Ronan's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but close. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, and Kaela felt something tighten in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to disappointment, which was insane. She should be relieved he was leaving. He paused with his hand on the latch. There's something else you should know. What? My brother's coming. The words dropped like stones. Kaela's breath caught. Your brother? Dristan. Ronan's expression darkened, his whole body going tense. He's been challenging my rule for years, thinks he'd make a better king. And now that you're here, he trailed off, jaw tight. He'll see you as a weakness, something he can exploit. Fear spiked through her, cold and sharp. Then send me away. I can't. Why not? Because you're not a weakness, Ronan said fiercely. He turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You're the only thing keeping me sane in this God's-forsaken place. And if Dristan thinks he can use you against me, he's wrong, but that won't stop him from trying. Kaela's pulse was racing now. What does that mean for me? Ronan held her gaze for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, more honest than she'd heard before. It means everything's about to get much worse, and I need you to trust me. I don't trust you. I know. Something almost like a smile ghosted across his face. But you will. No, he left her with that. Kaela stood alone in her chamber, staring at the closed door, trying to process everything he'd said. A brother, a challenge, a bond that would kill her if she ran. None of it made sense, all of it terrified her. She moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, snow had started to fall, fat, lazy flakes drifting down from a gray sky. The mountains looked even more impassable now, wrapped in white. She was stuck here, at least until she figured out what was real and what was manipulation. What was the bond and what was her own traitorous heart responding to a man who'd shown her the barest hint of humanity in a world that had shown her none? Kaela closed her eyes, breathing slowly. One thing at a time. Survive the brother. Learn the fortress. Understand the bond. And when the moment came, when she was strong enough, smart enough, prepared enough, she'd make her choice. Stay or run, live or die. But it would be her choice, not his. Never his. That night, she dreamed of wolves. They ran through dark forests, their howls echoing off unseen mountains. She ran with them, faster than she'd ever moved in waking life, her paws barely touching the ground. The pack surrounded her, warm bodies, familiar scents, the comfort of belonging. But when she looked up, searching for the alpha, she saw pale gray eyes staring back. Ronan. He stood at the head of the pack, larger than the others, darker, more dangerous. And when he looked at her, she felt that pull again, that ache, that hunger, that terrible, undeniable knowing. The bond. Kaela woke with a gasp, tangled in blankets, her heart racing. The room was dark. The fire had burned down to embers. Outside, the wind howled against the mountain, driving snow against the windows. She was alone, but she could still feel him, like a thread pulled taut between them, vibrating with tension. He was somewhere in this fortress, close enough to sense, far enough that it hurt. Kaela pressed a hand to her chest, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. This was real, all of it, and she had no idea what to do about it. Morning came with Mira and breakfast and news. "There's to be a gathering tonight," Mira said as she set down a tray of food. Her hands were shaking worse than usual. In the great hall, all the warriors, the council, everyone. Kaela looked up sharply. "Why?" "Prince Dristan arrived this morning." The food turned to ash in her mouth. "And?" Mira bit her lip. "The king has requested your presence." Kaela's stomach dropped. Requested? Or commanded? Does it matter? No, it didn't. Kaela pushed the tray away, her appetite gone. "What am I supposed to do?" "Stand beside him, show the court that you're—" Mira hesitated, searching for words. "That you're his." "I'm not his." "I know, but they don't, and right now that's all that matters." Kaela wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Mira to go back to Ronan and tell him he could take his gathering and shove it off the side of the mountain. But she remembered the way he'd looked last night, the exhaustion, the worry. "My brother will see you as a weakness." If she didn't show up, she'd be proving him right, and for reasons she didn't want to examine too closely, that bothered her more than it should. "Fine," Kaela said. "I'll go." Mira's relief was palpable. "I'll help you get ready." The dress Mira brought was unlike anything Kaela had ever worn. Deep crimson, the color of fresh blood. Heavy fabric that whispered against her skin. Fitted at the bodice, flowing at the skirt. Embroidered with silver thread and patterns that looked almost like wolves running through flames. "It was made for you," Mira said softly. "The king commissioned it days ago." Before he'd even brought her out of the cell. Kaela didn't know what to do with that information. Mira braided her hair, weaving silver cord through the strands, applied subtle cosmetics that hid the worst of the shadows under her eyes, stepped back to survey her work. "You look like a queen," she whispered. Kaela looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked strong, fierce, untouchable, nothing like the broken prisoner who'd been dragged from a cell 4 days ago. Maybe that was the point. The Great Hall was exactly what its name promised. Massive, ancient, built to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. Stone pillars rose to a vaulted ceiling lost in shadows. Torches blazed in iron brackets. Long tables filled the space, lined with warriors who went quiet when she entered. Every eye turned to watch her. Kaela forced herself to walk steadily, head high, refusing to show fear. The dress helped. The knowledge that she looked like she belonged here helped more. But what helped most was seeing Ronan at the far end of the hall. He stood on a raised platform, dressed in black leather and furs, a silver circlet resting on his dark hair. The king in truth, not just title. Powerful, dangerous, absolutely in command. Their eyes met across the distance, and she felt that pull again, stronger now, insistent. He didn't smile, didn't nod. Just watched her approach with an intensity that made her skin prickle. She climbed the steps to the platform, and he extended a hand. Kaela hesitated. This was the moment. The choice. Take his hand, and she was accepting this. The bond. The role. The place beside him. Refuse, and she was declaring war in front of his entire court. Kaela looked at his hand. scarred knuckles, calloused palm, steady despite everything. She looked up at his face, that hard, harsh face that had started to become familiar, and she made her choice. She took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and solid. Relief flashed through his eyes, there and gone in an instant. He turned her to face the hall, keeping her hand in his. "This is Kaela Thorne," Ronan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the massive room. "My mate, my queen, and anyone who questions her place here answers to me." Silence. Then, slowly, one by one, the warriors began to pound their fists on the tables. The sound built like thunder, shaking the walls, until the entire hall rang with it. Acceptance, or at least the appearance of it. Kayla's heart hammered in her chest, and then a voice cut through the noise. "How touching." The pounding stopped. A man stepped forward from the crowd, tall, dark-haired, with features that looked almost like Ronan's, but sharper, crueler. His eyes were cold and calculating as they swept over Kaela, Drystan. It had to be. "A mate," he continued, his voice dripping with mockery. "How convenient. How perfectly timed. Tell me, brother, did you find her, or did you make her?" Ronan's hand tightened on hers. "Careful, Dristan." "Or what?" Dristan smiled, all teeth and no warmth. "You'll throw me in the dungeons too? We both know you can't afford that, not with the council already questioning your judgment." He turned to address the hall. "This woman appears from nowhere, a random Omega from a nothing pack. And we're supposed to believe she's the sacred bond? The one destined to rule beside our king?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Doubt. Suspicion. Kaela felt Ronan tense beside her, felt the rage building beneath his skin. And in that moment, she understood. This wasn't about her. It was about him, his legitimacy, his power. Dristan was using her to undermine everything Ronan had built, and she was standing there silent, letting it happen. Something inside her snapped. "You're right," Kaela said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Every head turned toward her. "I am nobody, from a nothing pack on the edge of nowhere. I have no title, no power, no reason to be standing here." Dristan's smile widened. "But I'm here anyway," Kaela continued, her voice growing stronger. "Because your king crossed half the territories to find me. Because something bigger than both of us decided we belong together. And if you think that makes him weak..." She met Dristan's eyes directly. "Then you're a fool." Silence crashed down. Dristan's smile vanished. Ronan's hand squeezed hers, approval, gratitude, something that felt dangerously close to pride. "The bond doesn't care about politics," Kaela said, addressing the entire hall now. "It doesn't care about power or bloodlines or who thinks they deserve what. It just is. And you can accept that or not. But it won't change the truth." She turned to look up at Ronan, and the expression on his face stole her breath. Raw, open, completely unguarded. In that moment, she saw him, really saw him. Not the warlord, not the king. Just a man who'd been alone for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone stand beside him. And something shifted inside her. Not acceptance. Not yet. But the beginning of understanding. Maybe even the beginning of something more. The hall erupted in shouts, some supportive, some hostile, all chaotic. Dristan stared at her with undisguised hatred, and Kaela stood tall beside the Alpha King, her hand still in his, and realized that everything had just changed. There was no going back now. For better or worse, she was part of this. Part of him. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. Even if she still wasn't sure that was what she wanted. The feast that followed was a nightmare dressed up as celebration. Kaela sat beside Ronan at the high table, picking at food she couldn't taste while the hall churned with tension thick enough to choke on. Warriors drank and shouted, but their eyes kept sliding toward her, assessing, judging, waiting for her to crack. Drystan held court at a table near the center, surrounded by loyalists who laughed too loud at his jokes and shot dark looks toward the platform. He hadn't approached again since her declaration, but his presence pressed against the room like a blade held to the throat. "You did well," Ronan said quietly, leaning close enough that only she could hear. Kaela didn't look at him. "I didn't do it for you. I know." There was something almost like amusement in his voice. "You did it because you were angry. She was, still was, angry at Dristan for his smug face, angry at this entire brutal world for swallowing her whole, angry at Ronan for being right about the bond, because she'd felt it when she stood beside him. That steadying presence, that sense of rightness that terrified her more than any threat. "Eat something," Ronan said. "You're still too thin. Stop telling me what to do. Stop being stubborn." Kaela finally turned to glare at him and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not anger, not frustration. Something softer that made her chest tighten. "I mean it," he said. "You need your strength. The next few days won't be easy." "When are they ever?" His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then his gaze shifted past her, hardening instantly. "We have company." Kaela followed his look and saw an older woman approaching the platform. She moved with the rigid posture of someone who'd spent a lifetime demanding respect and receiving it. Gray hair pulled back severely, sharp features, eyes like flint. "Lady Saren," Ronan said, standing. His tone was formal, careful. "I wasn't aware you'd returned from the Eastern Holdings." "I arrived this morning." The woman's gaze slid to Kaela, cold and assessing. "I wanted to see for myself what all the fuss was about." Kaela stood slowly, refusing to be examined while sitting down. Lady Saren circled her like a buyer inspecting livestock. Small, underfed, no visible markings of rank or distinction. She looked at Ronan. "This is what you're risking your crown for? Careful." Ronan's voice dropped to something dangerous. "You're speaking about your queen." "I'm speaking about a girl who appeared from nowhere and claims a bond convenient enough to silence questions about your fitness to rule." The words landed like stones. Kaela felt anger flash hot through her veins. "I didn't claim anything. I didn't ask to be dragged here, and I certainly didn't ask to be bonded to a man who—" "Kaela." Ronan's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once in warning. But she was done being quiet. Done being inspected and dismissed and treated like a problem to be solved. "You want to know if the bond is real?" Kaela stepped forward, closing the distance between herself and Lady Saren. "Ask him. Ask him how he knew where to find me. Ask him what he felt when we were in the same room for the first time. Ask him—" "Enough." Lady Saren's voice cracked like a whip. "I don't need theatrics, girl. I need proof." "What kind of proof?" "The kind that doesn't conveniently appear when your king's legitimacy is being questioned by his own blood." Ronan moved to step between them, but Kaela was faster. "You think I wanted this?" Her voice shook with fury. "You think I wanted to be ripped from my home, thrown in a cell, told my entire life now belongs to a man I don't know? I'd give anything to go back." "Anything. But I can't. Because apparently if I leave, I die. So forgive me if I'm not performing my role to your standards, Lady Saren, but I'm doing the best I can with a situation I never asked for." Silence stretched across the platform. Lady Saren studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, her expression shifted. Not to warmth, but to something that might have been grudging respect. "At least she has fire," the older woman said to Ronan. "That's more than I expected." She turned and walked away without another word. Kaela stood there, breathing hard, her hands shaking with adrenaline. Ronan's hand settled on her lower back, warm, grounding. "You're going to make enemies if you keep doing that." "I already have enemies. At least this way they know I bite back." This time he did smile. Small, but real. "Come on, we're leaving. The feast isn't over. It is for us." He guided her off the platform, and the crowd parted automatically. Kaela felt their eyes following her every step, some hostile, some curious, all judging. She held her head high and didn't look back. "Bye." Ronan led her through corridors she didn't recognize, away from her chamber, away from the great hall. They climbed stairs that spiraled upward into one of the fortress towers. "Where are we going?" Kaela asked. "Somewhere we can talk without an audience." They emerged onto a rooftop terrace. The night air hit her like a slap, cold and sharp, carrying the bite of incoming snow. But the view stole her breath. The mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, peaks silver with moonlight, stars scattered across the sky like shattered glass. It was beautiful, brutal and lonely and achingly beautiful. Ronan moved to the edge, bracing his hands on the stone wall. For a long moment, he just stood there, staring out at his kingdom. "You didn't have to defend me," he said finally. "I wasn't defending you. I was defending myself." Same thing now. Kaela joined him at the wall, keeping a careful distance between them. "Is it always like this? The politics, the challenges, everyone waiting for you to fail?" "Yes." "How do you stand it?" "I don't have a choice." He glanced at her. "Neither do you anymore." The truth of that settled over her like a weight. She'd tied herself to him tonight in front of the entire court. There was no taking it back. "Tell me about the bond," Kaela said. "The real version, not the one designed to keep me compliant." Ronan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. "It's rare. Maybe 1 in 10,000 wolves ever experience it. Most think it's a myth, something from old stories that doesn't happen anymore. But it does. Sometimes." He turned to face her fully. "It's not romantic, Kaela. It's not gentle. It's a biological imperative that ties two people together whether they want it or not. Your heartbeat starts syncing with mine. Your emotional state affects me, and mine affects you. Physical separation causes pain, real, measurable pain that gets worse the longer you're apart. And if we ignored it, if we just endured the pain, you'd go mad first, your body would start shutting down, and then you'd die." His jaw tightened. "I've seen it happen. Once. A bonded pair tried to reject it. She lasted 3 months before her heart gave out." Kaela's stomach dropped. "You're saying I'm stuck with you, forever." "Unless one of us dies, yes." She wanted to scream, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it. But what was the point? The universe didn't care about fair. "I felt it," she admitted quietly. "Tonight, when I stood beside you, it was like everything settled into place, like I could breathe properly for the first time in months. I know, I felt it too. I hate it. I know that too." Ronan's expression softened. "For what it's worth, I didn't want this either. A mate is a liability, a weakness enemies can exploit. It would have been easier if the bond had never formed. But it did. They stood there in the cold, two people bound together by forces beyond their control, trying to figure out how to survive it. "Dristan will come for me," Kaela said. "Won't he?" "Yes." "When?" "Soon. He's been planning this challenge for months. Your arrival just gave him the excuse he needed." Ronan turned back to the view, his profile sharp against the stars. "He'll try to prove the bond is false, that I'm using you to shore up my power. If he succeeds in casting enough doubt, the council will call for a challenge." "What kind of challenge?" "The kind that ends with one of us dead." Fear spiked through her, cold and sharp. "You can't." "I can, and I will if it comes to that." He looked at her, and his eyes were fierce. "He won't take you from me, Kaela. I don't care what it costs." The intensity in his voice sent shivers down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "I should get back," Kaela said, suddenly needing distance, needing to think without his presence scrambling her thoughts. "I'll walk you. I can find my own way. I know you can. I'm walking you anyway." She didn't have the energy to argue. They descended in silence, the tower stairs echoing with their footsteps. When they reached her chamber, Ronan paused at the door. "What you did tonight," he said, "standing up to Saren, defending our bond in front of the court, that took courage. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." His hand came up, hesitating before settling gently against her cheek. The touch sent electricity racing through her. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be harder." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with her racing heart and the phantom warmth of his touch still burning on her skin. Kaela didn't sleep. She paced her chamber, thoughts spinning in endless circles. The bond, the court, Dristan's threat. Ronan's promise to protect her even if it killed him. None of it made sense. All of it terrified her. Somewhere around dawn, Mira arrived with breakfast and news that made Kaela's stomach drop. "The council has called a gathering," Mira said, her face pale. "This morning, they're demanding proof of the bond." "What kind of proof?" "I don't know, but Lady Saren is leading the inquiry." Mira's hands shook as she poured tea. "Kaela, they're not going to make this easy." "Nothing here is easy." "This is different. If they decide the bond is false..." She trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. They'd kill her, or exile her, or throw her back in that cell to rot. Kaela forced herself to eat, to dress, to prepare for whatever was coming. Mira helped her into another formal gown, deep blue this time, embroidered with silver stars. War paint for a battle fought with words instead of steel. The council chamber was smaller than the Great Hall, but somehow more intimidating. A circular room with stone walls and no windows. A single long table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs occupied by the oldest, hardest-looking wolves Kaela had ever seen. These were the ones who'd survived decades of northern politics, who'd outlasted rivals and challengers and younger, stronger wolves who'd thought they could take what wasn't theirs. They looked at Kaela like she was already dead. Ronan stood at the head of the table, rigid and formal. He didn't smile when she entered, didn't acknowledge her beyond a slight nod. Playing the king, not the mate. Lady Saren rose from her seat. "Miss Thorne, how good of you to join us." "I wasn't aware I had a choice." "You don't." Saren gestured to an empty chair. "Sit." Kaela remained standing. "I'd rather not. It wasn't a request, and I'm not taking orders from you." Tension crackled through the room. Several council members shifted in their seats. Ronan's jaw tightened, but he didn't intervene. Saren's eyes narrowed. "You're very brave for someone with no power and no allies." "I have the truth. That's enough." "Is it?" Saren moved around the table, circling Kaela like a predator. "Tell me, Miss Thorne, what do you know about bonding rituals?" "Not much." "Then let me educate you." Saren's voice took on a lecturing tone. "A true bond manifests in observable ways. Synchronized heartbeats, shared emotional states, physical symptoms when separated, and most importantly, a mark." Kaela's blood went cold. "A mark?" "A visible sign where the bond has taken root, usually appears on the skin within days of the bond forming." Saren stopped directly in front of her. "You've been here almost a week. If the bond were real, you'd be marked by now." Every eye in the room fixed on Kaela. She felt panic rising in her throat. She didn't have a mark. She'd checked. There was nothing. No strange birthmark, no new scar, nothing that would prove what Ronan claimed. "The mark doesn't always appear immediately," Ronan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "It can take weeks, sometimes months." "Convenient," Dristan's voice came from the doorway. He sauntered in, all casual menace. "Very convenient timing, brother." "Get out," Ronan said. "This is a closed council session. I'm family. I have a right to be here." Dristan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Especially when we're discussing whether our king has fabricated a mate to silence legitimate questions about his rule." "No one is questioning his rule," Saren said sharply. "Aren't we?" Dristan looked around the table. "He's been king for 5 years. 5 years of harsh laws and harsher punishments. 5 years of expansion wars that have bled our resources dry. And now, just when the council starts asking if maybe it's time for new leadership, he produces a mate from nowhere." He smiled coldly at Kaela. "No offense, sweetheart." "Don't call me sweetheart," Kaela said through gritted teeth. "See? She doesn't even like him." Dristan pushed off the wall. A real bond would have made her devoted, compliant. Instead, she looks at him like she's planning his murder. Several council members nodded. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Kaela felt the situation slipping away. Felt Dristan's words poisoning the room against her, against Ronan, against everything. She had to do something, say something. But what? "You want proof?" Kaela heard herself say. Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "Fine. Test us." "Metikoki, masapain." Ronan's head snapped toward her. "Kaela, no." She cut him off, stepping forward. They want to know if the bond is real? Then let them verify it. Whatever tests exist, we'll take them. Saren's eyebrows rose. That's unexpected. I'm full of surprises. Kaela met the older woman's gaze directly. But I'm done being questioned like a criminal. Either prove I'm lying or accept the truth and move on. Silence fell over the chamber. Then Saren smiled, sharp and predatory. Very well. There is a test. An old one, rarely used because of its intensity. What kind of test? Ronan demanded. Separation. If the bond is real, being apart will cause measurable distress, pain, physiological changes. Saren's eyes glittered. We separate you for 48 hours. Monitor both of you for symptoms. If the bond is genuine, it will be undeniable. Kaela's heart hammered. 48 hours. 2 days. Ronan had said separation caused pain, real, physical pain. But what choice did she have? If she refused, they'd call her a liar. They'd tear her and Ronan both down. I accept, Kaela said. Kaela, no! Ronan was at her side in 2 strides, gripping her arm. You don't know what you're agreeing to. I know exactly what I'm agreeing to. She met his eyes, saw fear there, real fear, for her. It's the only way. There has to be another. There isn't. She lowered her voice so only he could hear. Let me do this. Let me prove them wrong. Ronan stared at her for a long moment. Then, reluctantly, he nodded. It's settled then, Saren said. The separation begins immediately. Guards stepped forward, different ones, wearing the council's colors rather than Ronan's. They moved toward Kaela and Ronan's hand tightened on her arm. Don't hurt her, he said, voice low and dangerous. If anything happens to her, I'll burn this fortress to the ground. Dramatic as always, Dristan drawled. She'll be fine, brother. Unless, of course, the bond is fake. Then she'll be perfectly comfortable for 48 hours, and we'll all know you're a liar. The guards reached for Kaela. She let them take her arms, let them lead her toward the door. But she looked back once, meeting Ronan's gaze across the chamber. The anguish in his eyes nearly broke her. Then the door closed between them, and she was alone with strangers in a fortress that wanted her dead. They took her to a different chamber, smaller, sparse, with no windows and a single locked door. Not quite a cell, but close enough to make her skin crawl with memories. A woman in healer's robes waited inside. She was middle-aged, stern-faced, carrying a leather satchel filled with instruments Kaela didn't recognize. Sit, the healer commanded. Kaela sat on the narrow bed, watching warily. The healer pulled out a device that looked like a modified stethoscope. I'll be monitoring your vital signs every 4 hours. Heart rate, breathing, temperature. Any symptoms you experience, pain, nausea, disorientation, you report immediately. Understood? And if I don't have symptoms, then you're free to go, and the king is exposed as a fraud. The healer's expression was unreadable. Somehow, I don't think that's what you're hoping for. She was right. Despite everything, despite the anger and the fear and the resentment, Kaela didn't want Ronan to fall. Didn't want to see him destroyed by his own brother. When had that changed? When had she started caring? The healer finished her initial examination and left, locking the door behind her. Kaela was alone. The first hour was fine. She paced the small room, tested the door, locked solid, examined every corner looking for weaknesses. Found none. The second hour, restlessness set in. An itch under her skin that she couldn't scratch. She tried to sleep but couldn't settle. By the fourth hour, when the healer returned for the first check, Kaela's heart rate was elevated. Anxiety? The healer asked. Boredom, Kaela lied. But it wasn't boredom. It was that ache, the same one she'd felt for months before Ronan found her. Only stronger now, sharper, like something vital had been cut away and her body was screaming for it back. The eighth hour brought pain. Not terrible, not unbearable, just a persistent throb in her chest that wouldn't ease no matter how she positioned herself. She tried to ignore it, tried to breathe through it. Failed. By the 12th hour, she was sweating despite the cold. Her hands shook, her pulse raced. The pain had spread from her chest to her entire torso, a deep ache that felt like something inside was tearing. The healer's expression grew more serious with each examination. "How is he?" Kaela asked through gritted teeth. "Ronan, how is he handling it?" "That's not your concern." "Tell me anyway." The healer hesitated. Then, surprisingly, she answered, "Worse than you. He's been king long enough to hide it better, but the symptoms are severe." Something loosened in Kaela's chest, not relief exactly, but vindication. The bond was real. They both felt it. She wasn't alone in this nightmare. Hour 18 brought fever. Kaela lay curled on the bed, shivering despite the blankets, her skin burning. The pain had become constant now, a living thing gnawing at her from the inside. "This is enough," the healer said, packing her instruments with sharp, angry movements. "I'm reporting to the council that the test is conclusive." "No." Kaela forced herself upright. 48 hours. That's what Saren demanded. "You're suffering. I can handle it. You shouldn't have to." But she did, because if she gave up now, Dristan would claim she'd faked the symptoms, would say she'd put on a performance for the first day and couldn't maintain it. She had to last the full 48 hours. Hour 24 was the worst. The pain had reached a crescendo that made thinking impossible. Kaela couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, could barely move without agony lancing through her. Her heart rate had spiked dangerously. Her fever climbed higher, and through it all she felt him. Ronan, his presence like a distant star, too far to touch but bright enough to navigate by. His pain echoing hers, his desperation matching her own. The bond wasn't just real, it was undeniable. Hour 36 brought hallucinations. Kaela saw wolves in the shadows, heard voices that weren't there. Saw Ronan standing in the corner of the room, reaching for her, his eyes full of anguish. "I'm sorry," the phantom said. "I'm so sorry." "Not your fault," she whispered to the empty air. The healer stayed now, abandoning pretense. She monitored Kaela constantly, her face growing grimmer with each passing hour. "This is cruel," the woman muttered. "Barbaric. The bond is proven. Everyone knows it by now." But Saren hadn't called it off, and Kaela refused to quit. Hour 48 arrived like salvation. The door burst open. Ronan filled the doorway, looking like death, pale, haggard, shaking with the same fever that consumed Kaela. But alive. Here. Real. Their eyes met across the room. The bond snapped tight between them like a rope pulled taut, and suddenly the pain didn't matter. Nothing mattered except closing the distance. Kaela tried to stand. Her legs gave out. Ronan crossed the room in 2 strides and caught her, pulling her against him. His arms wrapped around her, solid and real and warm. The moment they touched, the pain began to recede. Not gone, but bearable. Kaela buried her face in his chest and felt his heart hammering against her cheek, sinking with her own. "Never again," Ronan said into her hair. His voice was rough, broken. "I don't care what they demand. Never again." Kaela couldn't answer, could only hold on and let the bond settle back into place, knitting them back together. They stayed like that for a long time. 2 people who'd endured hell to prove what they'd known all along. The bond was real, and it was going to destroy them both. The council convened that evening, but Kaela didn't attend. She couldn't. Her body was still recovering from the separation, every muscle weak and trembling. The healer had ordered bed rest, threatened to sedate her if she tried to leave the chamber. Ronan had gone alone to face the council. Kaela lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling his presence through the bond. He was angry. She could sense it like smoke on the wind. Furious at what they'd been put through, but also vindicated. No one could question the bond now. When he returned hours later, she saw the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. But also something else. Something that looked almost like triumph. "The council has accepted it," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "The bond is verified. Legitimate. Saren herself confirmed it." "And Dristan?" Ronan's expression darkened. "He's called for a formal challenge. Single combat. Winner takes the throne." Kaela's blood went cold. "When?" 3 days. 3 days. Barely enough time to recover, let alone prepare. "You can't fight him," Kaela said. "Not like this." Not when you're still weak from the separation. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not in this world. Ronan's hand found hers, fingers intertwining. This has been coming for years. The bond just forced it to happen sooner. Kaela stared at their joined hands, at the way they fit together like they'd been made for this. She'd spent 2 days in agony, felt her body trying to tear itself apart from separation, and now she was supposed to sit back and watch him fight to the death? No, she couldn't do that. Wouldn't do that. Then I'm coming with you, Kaela said. To the challenge. I want to be there. Kaela, don't argue. I've earned the right to see this through. Ronan studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. All right, he said. But you stay back. You don't interfere, no matter what happens. I can't promise that. Promise anyway. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that if Drystan tried to kill him, she'd burn the whole fortress down. But she saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. And she understood. He needed to know she'd be safe, even if it cost him everything. I promise, Kaela whispered. It was the biggest lie she'd ever told. It was the biggest lie she'd ever told. The words hung between them in the quiet chamber, and Kaela felt the weight of her deception settle into her bones. She would interfere. She would do whatever it took to keep Ronan alive, promise or no promise. But he didn't need to know that yet. Ronan's hand tightened around hers, and she felt his relief through the bond, a warm pulse that made her chest ache. He believed her, trusted her. That made the lie worse. Get some rest, he said, standing slowly. His movements were stiff, careful. The separation had damaged him too, left him hollowed out and weak. Tomorrow I start training. I need to be ready. You can barely stand. I'll manage. He moved toward the door, then paused. Kaela, thank you for going through the test, for proving them wrong. She wanted to tell him it wasn't for him, wanted to maintain that wall between them, keep her heart safe behind stone and anger. But she was tired of lying. You're welcome, she whispered. After he left, Kaela lay in the darkness and tried not to think about what 3 days from now would bring. Tried not to imagine Ronan's blood on the stones. Tried not to feel the bond already mourning something that hadn't happened yet. Sleep didn't come. Morning arrived with Mira and news that made Kaela's stomach twist. The entire fortress is talking about it, Mira said, setting down a breakfast tray with shaking hands. The challenge. Everyone's taking sides, placing bets. Some are saying Drystan will kill him in under an hour. He won't. You sound certain. I am. Kaela forced herself to eat, though the food tasted like ash. Ronan survived this long for a reason. He's stronger than Drystan thinks. But was he strong enough? After 2 days of separation that had nearly killed them both? With barely 72 hours to recover before fighting for his life? Kaela shoved the doubts away. They wouldn't help. I need to see the training yards, she said. Can you take me? Mira's eyes widened. I don't think... Please. Something in Kaela's voice made the girl nod. All right, but stay back. Don't let anyone see you watching. They went through servants' passages, narrow corridors that snaked through the fortress walls. Mira knew every hidden route, every overlooked corner. It reminded Kaela that this girl had survived 2 years in this brutal place. She was stronger than she looked. The training yards occupied a massive courtyard carved into the mountain itself. Stone walls rose on 3 sides. The fourth opened to a sheer drop that made Kaela's head spin. Warriors filled the space, dozens of them, moving through combat drills with vicious precision. And in the center, Ronan. Kaela's breath caught. He moved like violence given form. Fast, brutal, efficient. His opponent, a massive warrior with scars crisscrossing his chest, came at him with a battle axe. Ronan dodged, twisted, drove his fist into the man's kidney hard enough that Kaela heard the impact from 50 feet away. The warrior went down. Ronan didn't stop. Another opponent stepped forward immediately, this one armed with a spear. They circled each other, and Kaela saw the calculation in Ronan's eyes. Reading the stance, the grip, the tiny tells that would predict the attack. The spear thrust forward. Ronan moved inside the reach, caught the shaft, and used the momentum to flip the warrior onto his back. Disarmed him, put a boot on his throat, yield. The watching warriors pounded their fists against their chests. Approval, respect, acknowledgement of dominance. "He's incredible," Mira whispered. She was right. Despite the exhaustion, despite the damage from the separation, Ronan fought like a man who'd been born for this. Like violence was a language he spoke fluently, but Kaela saw what the others didn't. The slight hesitation in his left leg, the way he favored his right side, the tension in his shoulders that spoke of pain he was pushing through. He was hurt, still recovering, and Dristan would know it. As if summoned by the thought, Dristan appeared at the far end of the yard. He leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching his brother with a smile that made Kaela's skin crawl. "Enjoying the show?" he called out. Ronan straightened, breathing hard. "What do you want?" "Just observing, making sure you're taking this seriously." Dristan pushed off the wall, strolling into the yard like he owned it. "Though I have to say, brother, you look tired, worn down, almost like you spent 2 days in agony because of a bond you claim is real." "The bond is real. The council confirmed it." "Oh, I know. I was there." Dristan stopped a few feet away. "I saw the healer's reports, saw the symptoms. Very convincing." "Then what's your point?" "My point is that even if the bond is real, it's made you weak." Dristan's voice carried across the yard, making sure every warrior heard. "You're so busy playing mate that you've forgotten how to be king, and in 3 days I'm going to prove it." Ronan's hands clenched into fists. "You're welcome to try." "Try?" Dristan laughed. "Brother, I'm going to rip your throat out in front of the entire court. And then I'm going to take your throne, your territory, and your pretty little mate." The words hit like a physical blow. Kaela felt Ronan's rage through the bond, white-hot, barely controlled, saw his muscles coil, saw the violence brewing beneath his skin. "Touch her," Ronan said, his voice dropping to something inhuman. "And I'll make sure you die slowly." "We'll see." Dristan turned to leave, then paused. His eyes swept the yard and landed directly on Kaela's hiding spot. "Won't we, sweetheart?" Kaela's blood turned to ice. He knew she was there, had known the whole time. Dristan smiled, cold and predatory, then walked away. "We need to go," Mira hissed, pulling at Kaela's arm. "Now!" They fled through the servants' passages, Mira setting a punishing pace. Kaela's heart hammered against her ribs, the way Dristan had looked at her, like she was prey, like he was already planning what he'd do once Ronan was dead. The bond pulsed with Ronan's fury, his fear for her, his absolute determination to keep her safe. But what if he couldn't? What if Dristan won? That night, Ronan came to her chamber later than usual. He looked exhausted, sweat-stained and bruised from hours of training, but his eyes were clear, focused. "I saw you today," he said, "at the yards." Kaela didn't bother denying it. "I needed to see for myself." "And?" "You're good, better than good." She met his gaze. "But you're hurt, and Dristan knows it." "I'm aware." "So what's the plan? Hope adrenaline carries you through? Push past the pain and pray it's enough?" Essentially, yes." "That's a terrible plan." "It's the only plan I have." Ronan crossed to the window, staring out at the mountains. "I've fought Dristan before. Sparring matches when we were younger. He's fast, strong, vicious when he needs to be. But he's arrogant. He thinks he's already won." "And that's your advantage?" "It's the best one I've got." Kaela moved to stand beside him. The bond hummed between them, stronger now after the separation. She could feel his heartbeat as clearly as her own. "What happens if you lose?" she asked quietly. "I won't. But if you do, then you run." He turned to face her, gripping her shoulders. "The moment I fall, you get out of this fortress. Mira will help you. I've already arranged it. She knows the routes, the safe houses. She'll get you to the southern border." "I'm not leaving you." "You have to." "No." Kaela pulled away, anger flashing hot. "I didn't survive that separation test, didn't prove the bond to the entire court. just to run away the first time things get hard. This isn't hard, Kaela. This is death. If Dristan becomes king, he'll kill you just to prove he can. Then you'd better not lose. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Ronan let out a harsh breath. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Good. You need someone who won't just obey blindly. Something almost like a smile crossed his face. Then it faded, replaced by something more vulnerable. I need you to understand something. If I die, when I die eventually, the bond will try to take you with me. It happens sometimes with bonded pairs. One dies, the other follows within hours, days at most. Kaela's stomach dropped. That's real. It's real. His hands found hers, threading their fingers together. But I've arranged for the healers to give you something, a compound that will sever the bond before it can kill you. It won't be pleasant, but you'll survive. I don't want to survive without you. The words came out before she could stop them. Ronan froze. What? Kaela swallowed hard, her heart racing. When had it changed? When had she stopped seeing him as her captor and started seeing him as what? Her mate? Her partner? The man she couldn't imagine losing? I don't want to survive without you, she repeated, softer this time. I know I should. I know I'm supposed to hate you for everything you've done, but I don't. And I can't watch you die. Ronan's expression crumbled. He pulled her against him, wrapping his arms around her so tightly she could barely breathe. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm sorry for all of it. The cell, the chains, the separation, all of it. Stop apologizing. I can't. You deserve better than this. Maybe. Kaela pulled back enough to look at him. But this is what we have, so we make it work. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate and achingly gentle all at once. The bond flared between them, golden and warm, and for just a moment the world narrowed to this. To them, to the impossible thing growing between two people who should have been enemies. When they broke apart, Ronan rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight, he said. Please, I don't want to be alone. Kaela nodded. They lay together in her bed, fully clothed, just holding each other. The bond settled over them like a blanket, soothing the ragged edges, filling the hollow spaces. And Kaela made a decision. If it came down to it, if Ronan started losing, she would break her promise. She would interfere, even if it cost her everything. The next 2 days passed in a blur of tension and preparation. Kaela watched Ronan train with increasing desperation. He was getting stronger, faster, but was it enough? The warriors seemed confident, pounding their approval after each bout. But she saw Lady Saren watching from the shadows, her expression unreadable. On the second day, Saren approached Kaela directly. Walk with me, the older woman said. It wasn't a request. They walked the fortress walls, the wind biting at their faces. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, dark and forbidding. You're planning something, Saren said. I can see it in your eyes. I don't know what you mean. Don't play stupid. It doesn't suit you. Saren stopped, turning to face her. You're planning to interfere in the challenge, to help Ronan somehow. Kaela's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. He made me promise I wouldn't. And you think that promise will hold when you see him bleeding out on the stones? Saren's eyes were sharp, knowing. I've seen bonded pairs before, girl. The connection makes you reckless, makes you do things that defy logic. Then why warn me? Because if you interfere, it will invalidate the challenge. The council will declare Ronan's victory illegitimate. Dristan will still take the throne. The words hit like stones. You're lying, Kaela said. I'm not. The challenge has rules, sacred ones. If anyone interferes, anyone, the challenger wins by default. Saren's expression softened slightly. I don't want to see Ronan fall any more than you do, but if you try to save him, you'll destroy him instead. Kaela felt her carefully constructed plan crumbling. So what am I supposed to do? Just watch? Yes. Trust that he's strong enough. Trust the bond that ties you together. Saren paused. And if he falls, you run. You survive. You carry his legacy forward. I can't. You must. Saren gripped her arm. Because if Dristan becomes king with you still alive, he'll use you, break you, turn you into a weapon against everything Ronan built. Is that what you want? No, it wasn't, but neither was watching Ronan die. Kaela pulled away, her mind spinning. I need to think. Think quickly. The challenge is tomorrow. Well, that night, Kaela couldn't sleep. She paced her chamber, Saren's words echoing in her head. Every scenario ended in blood, in loss, in impossible choices. Around midnight, Ronan appeared at her door. He looked grim, determined. I need to tell you something, he said. What? If something goes wrong tomorrow, if I lose, I need you to know that this wasn't a mistake. He stepped closer. The bond. Finding you. Bringing you here. Even with everything that's happened, I don't regret it. Don't talk like that. I have to. His hands cupped her face. Because tomorrow, I might not get another chance. Kaela's eyes burned. You're going to win. Maybe. But if I don't, you will. She gripped his wrists, holding him to her. You have to, because I'm not strong enough to lose you. Yes, you are. You're the strongest person I know. Then you don't know me very well. Ronan smiled, sad and soft. I know you better than anyone. He kissed her, and Kaela tasted desperation in it, fear, love that neither of them had dared to name. When he pulled away, his eyes were fierce. Promise me something, he said. What? If I fall, if Dristan wins, you let me go. You take that compound, sever the bond, and you run. You don't look back. Kaela wanted to promise, wanted to give him that peace, but she'd already told him one lie. She wouldn't tell another. I promise to survive, she said carefully, one way or another. It wasn't the answer he wanted, but it was the only one she could give. Dawn came too fast. Kaela dressed in the crimson gown again, war paint for a battle she couldn't fight. Mira helped her with trembling hands, both of them silent. The challenge would take place in the main courtyard, the same space where warriors trained. But today, the stones had been cleared. A circle marked in white paint. No weapons allowed, just fists, teeth, and claws. The entire fortress gathered to watch. Kaela stood on the platform beside the council, her heart in her throat. Ronan appeared from one entrance, bare-chested, his body a map of scars and muscle. He looked calm, ready. But she felt his fear through the bond, his determination to protect her, even if it killed him. Dristan entered from the opposite side, and the crowd roared. He played to them, raising his arms, grinning like this was already over. Lady Saren stood, her voice cutting through the noise. This is a formal challenge for the right to rule. Single combat. No interference, no mercy. The fight ends when one submits or dies. She looked directly at Kaela when she said interference. The message was clear. The brothers moved to the center of the circle. They circled each other, and Kaela saw the family resemblance. Same height, same build, same predatory grace. But Ronan carried himself differently. Where Dristan was all flash and arrogance, Ronan was controlled, precise. Last chance to yield, brother, Dristan said. Give me the throne, and I'll let you live. Even let you keep your pet. Go to hell, Ronan replied. Dristan lunged. The fight exploded into violence so fast Kaela barely tracked it. They collided in the center, fists flying, the impact of flesh on flesh echoing off stone. Dristan was fast, faster than Kaela expected. He landed a brutal hit to Ronan's ribs, another to his jaw. Ronan staggered, but didn't fall. He countered with a vicious uppercut that snapped Dristan's head back, followed with a knee to the stomach that doubled the challenger over. The crowd screamed. They broke apart, circling again. Blood ran from Ronan's split lip. Dristan's eye was already swelling. You're slow, Dristan taunted. Weak. That bond has ruined you. Keep talking. See where it gets you. They clashed again, and this time Dristan got the upper hand. He caught Ronan's arm, twisted, and threw him to the ground. Before Ronan could recover, Dristan was on him, raining down blows. Kaela's hands gripped the railing so hard her knuckles went white. Every impact she felt through the bond, sharp bursts of pain that made her gasp. But she couldn't interfere. Saren's warning echoed in her head. Ronan managed to buck Drystan off, rolled to his feet, but he was slower now, favoring that left leg again. Dristan saw it too. His smile widened. There it is, the weakness. He went low, sweeping Ronan's legs. Ronan went down hard, and Dristan followed, driving an elbow into his ribs. Kaela heard the crack from the platform. Broken bone. Ronan's pain flooded the bond, white-hot and terrible. She felt her own ribs ache in sympathy, felt her breath catch. He was losing. Dristan straddled him, hands wrapping around his throat. Any last words, brother? Ronan's hands clawed at Dristan's grip, but his strength was fading. The crowd had gone quiet, watching their king suffocate. Kaela felt it through the bond, the oxygen deprivation, the rising panic, the darkness creeping in at the edges. This was it. This was how he died. And she'd promised not to interfere. But promises meant nothing if Ronan was dead. Kaela's hand went to the knife hidden in her skirts, a small blade she'd taken from the kitchens days ago. Insurance, just in case. She could throw it, hit Drystan before anyone realized what was happening. Save Ronan. Damn the consequences. Her fingers closed around the hilt, and then everything changed. Ronan's eyes snapped open, not brown anymore, but pure gold. Wolf eyes. The bond between them flared so bright Kaela gasped, feeling power surge through the connection like lightning. Ronan's hand shot up, catching Drystan's wrist. His grip tightened, and Kaela heard bones creak. Drystan's confident expression shattered into shock. Ronan twisted, throwing Drystan off with inhuman strength. Rose to his feet in one fluid motion, moving faster than before. Stronger. The bond had done something, changed something. Kaela felt it too, power flowing from her to him, through the connection they'd forged. She wasn't just watching anymore, she was part of the fight. Ronan went on the offensive, and this time Dristan couldn't keep up. Each hit landed with devastating precision, ribs, jaw, knee. Ronan dismantled his brother methodically, brutally, showing no mercy. The crowd roared approval. Dristan tried to fight back, but it was useless. Ronan caught him by the throat, lifted him off his feet, and slammed him into the ground so hard the stones cracked. Yield, Ronan commanded. Dristan spat blood. Never. Then die. Ronan's hand tightened, and Kaela saw murder in his eyes. The bond thrummed with his rage, his need to end this threat permanently. But killing Drystan would make Ronan the monster everyone feared, would prove that violence was all he knew. Through the bond, Kaela sent a single thought. Stop. Ronan hesitated. Their eyes met across the courtyard, and she saw the war raging inside him. Justice versus mercy. Safety versus morality. Please, she thought, don't become what they think you are. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Ronan released Drystan's throat. The challenger collapsed, gasping, defeated, but alive. You're banished, Ronan said, his voice carrying across the silent courtyard. You leave tonight. If you ever return, I'll finish this. He turned his back on his brother and walked toward Kaela. The crowd erupted, but Kaela only saw him, bloodied, broken, but alive, walking toward her like she was the only thing that mattered. He climbed the platform steps, and she met him halfway. You won, she whispered. We won. His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. I felt you, through the bond, your strength, your belief in me. I almost interfered. I know. I felt that too. He smiled through the blood and exhaustion. But you didn't. You trusted me. Don't make me regret it. He kissed her then, in front of the entire court, and the bond blazed between them like fire. This was it. The moment everything changed. No more pretending the bond was just biological. No more fighting what they both felt. This was real. But even as Kaela kissed him back, even as the crowd celebrated and the council nodded approval, she saw movement at the edge of the courtyard. Drystan dragging himself to his feet, blood running from his mouth, eyes fixed on them with pure hatred, and in his hand, concealed in his sleeve, a blade. Kaela's scream came too late. Kaela's scream came too late. Dristan moved faster than someone half dead should have been able to move. The blade flashed in the sunlight as he lunged toward Ronan's exposed back. Murder, written across his bloodied face. But Kaela was already moving. She didn't think, didn't calculate, just acted on pure instinct, throwing herself between them. The knife hidden in her skirts found her hand, and she brought it up in a desperate arc. Steel met steel with a sound that rang across the courtyard. Dristan's eyes went wide with shock. He'd expected an easy kill. Instead, he found a woman who'd survived his brother's dungeons, survived a separation test that should have broken her, and had no intention of losing either of them now. "No," Kaela said through gritted teeth, holding the block. Her arm screamed with the effort of stopping his momentum. "Not today." Dristan snarled and shoved harder. Kayla's feet slid backward on the stone, her strength nothing compared to his. But she didn't need to beat him. She just needed to buy seconds. Ronan spun around, saw the tableau, and his face transformed into something terrifying. He caught Dristan by the throat and physically threw him backward. The challenger hit the ground hard, his blade skittering away across the stones. "Guards!" Ronan's voice thundered across the courtyard. "Take him, now!" Warriors swarmed forward, pinning Dristan to the ground. He fought like a rabid animal, screaming curses, but they held him fast. "You can't do this!" Dristan shrieked. "The challenge was over. I yielded." "You yielded, then drew a blade." Lady Saren's cold voice cut through the chaos. She descended from the platform, her face carved from stone. "That's not just dishonorable. It's treason. I was defending myself." "Against your brother's back?" Saren's eyebrow arched. "Witnesses saw everything, Dristan. You're done." Ronan turned to Kaela, gripping her shoulders. His hands were shaking. "You could have been killed." "So could you." "That's different." "No, it's not." Kayla's own hands trembled as the adrenaline started to fade. "You think I'm going to stand there and watch someone stab you in the back? After everything?" Something raw and broken crossed Ronan's face. He pulled her against him, holding so tight she could barely breathe. Through the bond, she felt his fear crash over her in waves. Not for himself, but for her. For what could have happened. "Don't ever do that again," he whispered into her hair. "Can't promise that." "Try." The crowd had gone silent, watching them. Watching the Alpha King hold his mate like she was the only thing keeping him anchored to the earth. Watching a woman who'd been a prisoner 3 weeks ago stand between him and a blade without hesitation. Something shifted in the air. Kaela felt it, the change in how they looked at her. Not with suspicion anymore, not with doubt, with something that might have been respect. Lady Saren cleared her throat. "Take Dristan to the cells. Maximum security. He'll stand trial for treason." "Trial?" Dristan laughed bitterly as the guards hauled him to his feet. "Just kill me now and spare everyone the theater." "We have laws," Saren said coldly, "even for traitors." They dragged him away, still screaming threats. Kaela watched him go and felt nothing but relief that it was over. Except it wasn't over, not really. Ronan swayed slightly, and Kaela steadied him. "You need a healer." "I'm fine." "You have broken ribs and you can barely stand. You're not fine." "Stubborn woman," he muttered, but he let her guide him toward the platform steps. The healer appeared immediately, the same stern woman who'd monitored Kaela during the separation test. She took one look at Ronan and her mouth thinned. "Sit," she commanded. For once, Ronan obeyed. The healer worked efficiently, binding his ribs, checking for internal damage. Kaela stood beside him, their hands still linked, the bond humming with his pain and her concern. "You'll live," the healer announced finally. "But you need rest, days of it. No training, no official duties, nothing strenuous." "Impossible. The council can wait." Lady Saren had approached without Kaela noticing. "You've just fought a challenge to the death. No one expects you to resume normal duties tomorrow." Ronan looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up to him. Kaela felt it through the bond, his body finally admitting what his mind refused to accept. He was hurt, badly. "I'll handle the council," Saren continued. "You handle recovery, and you—" She turned to Kaela. "Make sure he actually rests. Use the bond if you have to." It was the first time anyone in authority had acknowledged her right to influence the king. The first time someone had treated her like she belonged in this role. "I will," Kaela said. Saren nodded once, then left to deal with the dispersing crowd. Ronan stood slowly, wincing. I can walk on my own. I know, you're walking with me anyway. They made their way through the fortress, guards falling into step behind them. Everyone they passed stopped to stare, stopped to see their king, bloodied but alive, walking beside the mate who'd thrown herself in front of a blade for him. The whispers followed them like smoke. Did you see her move? Blocked the strike barehanded. Maybe the bond is real after all. She fought for him, actually fought. By the time they reached Ronan's chambers, larger and more austere than Kaela's, she could feel the shift. The fortress was reassessing her, recalculating her value. She'd stopped being a problem and started becoming something else. Inside, Ronan collapsed onto his bed with a groan. The room was practical, a workspace more than living quarters. Maps covered one wall, weapons hung on another, books stacked everywhere. This is where you live? Kaela asked. I don't live anywhere. I just exist between crises. He closed his eyes. Thank you for what you did. You already thanked me. I'll probably thank you another dozen times before I'm done processing the fact that you nearly died for me. Kaela sat on the edge of the bed, careful not to jostle him. I didn't nearly die. I barely slowed Dristan down. You bought me time. That's all I needed. His hand found hers. I meant what I said before. We won. Together. The bond pulsed between them, warm and steady. For the first time since this nightmare began, Kaela felt something like peace. What happens now? She asked. Now we rebuild. Drystan's supporters will need to be dealt with. The council will want reassurances. And you. He opened his eyes, looking at her seriously. You'll need to take your place officially, as queen. I'm not ready for that. Neither was I when I became king. You learn. That's not inspiring. It wasn't meant to be. He squeezed her hand. But you're stronger than you think. You've already proven it. Kaela wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe she could do this, lead beside him, face down the brutal politics of this world, become the queen they needed. But doubt gnawed at her. What if I fail? She whispered. Then we fail together. Ronan pulled her down beside him, careful of his injuries. That's what the bond means. Whatever comes, we face it as one. She curled against him, feeling his heartbeat sync with hers. Outside, the fortress stirred with activity, guards changing shifts, servants cleaning up from the challenge, warriors returning to their routines. But in this moment, in this room, there was only them. Two people who'd been thrown together by fate and were slowly, painfully, learning what that meant. Kaela closed her eyes and let herself rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles, but tonight they'd survived. That had to be enough. Bam. Morning came with urgent knocking. Kaela jerked awake, momentarily disoriented. She was in Ronan's bed, still fully clothed, her head on his chest. His arm was wrapped around her, holding her close even in sleep. The bond hummed contentedly between them. The knocking came again, more insistent. Enter, Ronan called, his voice rough. A young guard stepped inside, looking nervous. Apologies, sire, but the council requests your presence, and… He glanced at Kaela. The queen's as well. Queen. The word still didn't feel real. When? Ronan asked, sitting up with a wince. Within the hour, if possible. Fine. Tell them we'll be there. The guard bowed and left. Kaela stood, stretching out the kinks from sleeping in a corset. What do you think they want? Probably to discuss Drystan's trial, maybe other political matters. Ronan swung his legs off the bed carefully, but they specifically requested you. That's significant. Good significant or bad significant? With this council? Hard to say. Mira appeared shortly after with fresh clothes. Another formal gown for Kaela, this one deep emerald green. She also brought breakfast, though neither of them had much appetite. The whole fortress is talking about yesterday, Mira said as she helped Kaela dress. About how you saved the king. About the bond. What are they saying? That maybe they were wrong about you. That maybe you're exactly what the kingdom needs. Mira's hands were steadier today, more confident. It's a start. It was more than a start. It was the first crack in the wall of hostility that had surrounded Kaela since she'd arrived. When they entered the council chamber an hour later, every seat was filled. Lady Saren sat at the head of the table, flanked by the oldest council members. They all stood when Ronan entered, a gesture of respect that extended to Kaela as well. That was new. "Please, sit," Saren said, gesturing to two chairs that had been placed at the head of the table. Together. Equal. Kaela sat beside Ronan, hyper-aware of every eye on her. "First order of business," Saren began. "Drystan's trial will be held in 3 days. Given the severity of his crimes, attempted regicide, violation of challenge law, treason, we expect the verdict will be unanimous." "Execution," one of the older council members said flatly. Ronan nodded. "He'll have the right to speak in his defense, but the evidence is clear. Multiple witnesses saw the attack, including the Queen," another council member added, looking at Kaela. "Your testimony will be crucial." Her testimony. They were treating her like a legitimate witness, like her word carried weight. "I'll testify," Kaela said. "I saw everything." "Good." Saren made a note on the parchment in front of her. "Next matter. The separation test proved the bond beyond any doubt. As such, we need to formalize the Queen's position. Coronation, official titles, legal authority." Kaela's stomach flipped. That's not necessary. The bond is enough." "It's not," Saren said, not unkindly. "You're the king's mate, yes, but you're also a political entity now. You need the legal framework to protect you, to give you authority when Ronan can't act, to ensure succession if—" She trailed off delicately. "If he dies." The unspoken words hung in the air. "The council is proposing a coronation ceremony," another member said, 2 weeks from now. Public, formal, binding in both law and tradition. 2 weeks. Barely any time at all. "Do I have a choice?" Kaela asked. "Technically, yes," Saren said. "Practically, no. You're already functioning as queen. We're just making it official." Kaela looked at Ronan. He was watching her carefully, letting her make this decision on her own. Through the bond, she felt his support, his belief that she could do this. And maybe she could. She'd survived everything else. Why not this? "Fine," Kaela said. 2 weeks. The relief in the room was palpable. Several council members actually smiled. "There's one more matter," Saren said. "Drystan's supporters. We've identified at least a dozen warriors who are actively plotting with him. They need to be dealt with." "Exile," Ronan said immediately. "Like I promised Drystan. They leave. They don't come back. Some of them hold significant positions. Exiling them creates power vacuums. Then we fill them." Ronan's voice was firm. "I won't execute people for backing the wrong horse in a political game. They weren't part of the assassination attempt. They just believed Drystan would make a better king." "Merciful, sir," one council member muttered. "Some would say too merciful. Then they can say it to my face." Ronan leaned forward. "I'm trying to build a kingdom based on law, not fear. That means consequences that match the crime. Dristan tried to kill me, his supporters didn't. The punishment should reflect that." Murmurs around the table. Not all approving, but not hostile either. Lady Saren nodded slowly. "Exile, then, but stripped of titles and lands. They leave with nothing but what they can carry." Agreed. They spent the next hour hammering out details, trial procedures, coronation plans, political appointments. Kaela mostly listened, absorbing information, learning how this world worked. But when they discussed border security, she spoke up. "What about the southern territories?" she asked. "The council keeps mentioning northern threats, but no one's talking about the south." The room went quiet. "The south is stable," one council member said dismissively. "Is it? Because I came from a southern border pack. We had raiding parties every few months. Bandits, rogue wolves. No one from the capital ever came to help. The southern packs are autonomous. They handle their own security." "With what resources?" Kaela challenged. "Most of them are small, poor. They can barely feed themselves, let alone maintain defenses. If you want stability, you need to support them, not ignore them. Saren's eyes sharpened with interest. What do you propose? Rotating garrison support. Send warriors to help patrol. Provide resources, weapons, supplies. Make the southern packs feel like they're part of this kingdom, not forgotten stepchildren. That would require significant resource allocation, another council member protested. Less than dealing with a southern rebellion when they get tired of being abandoned, Kaela shot back. Ronan was staring at her with something like pride. Through the bond, she felt his approval. The Queen makes a valid point, Saren said. We'll form a committee to explore options. Kaela, you'll chair it. Wait, what? I don't know anything about... You know the South. You know their struggles. That makes you more qualified than anyone else at this table. Saren's expression was almost approving. Welcome to governance, Your Majesty. The meeting continued, but Kaela barely heard it. She'd just been handed actual responsibility, actual power to change things. It was terrifying and exhilarating. When the session finally ended, Ronan took her hand as they left. That was well done. I just spoke up. You identified a problem the council's been ignoring for years, and you proposed a solution. He squeezed her hand. That's leadership. I thought I was just complaining about my old pack getting raided. Leadership often starts with personal grievance. You turned yours into policy. They walked through the corridors, guards trailing discreetly behind. Kaela felt different now, like something had shifted permanently. She wasn't just Ronan's mate anymore. She was becoming part of the machinery that ran this kingdom. I'm scared, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. Ronan paused outside a set of tall doors she didn't recognize. There's something I want to show you. He pushed the doors open, revealing a library. But not just any library. This one soared 3 stories high, with shelves reaching toward vaulted ceilings. Thousands of books lined the walls. Histories, laws, stories, knowledge accumulated over centuries. Kaela's breath caught. This is incredible. It's yours now. As queen, you have access to everything. Ronan gestured to the vast collection. Anything you want to learn, it's here. Battle strategy, diplomatic history, legal precedents, all of it. She moved into the space slowly, overwhelmed. Growing up on the frontier, she'd had access to maybe a dozen books total. This was a treasure beyond imagining. Why are you showing me this? She asked. Because you're going to need it. Chairing that Southern committee, dealing with the coronation, navigating court politics. You'll need knowledge, strategy. He came to stand beside her. I can teach you some, but a lot of it you'll have to learn yourself. Kaela ran her fingers along a shelf of leather-bound volumes. I don't know where to start. Start with what interests you. The rest will follow. Ronan smiled. You've survived everything this place has thrown at you. You'll survive this too. She wanted to believe him, and maybe, for the first time, she actually did. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Kaela threw herself into preparation. She read voraciously. Histories of the kingdom, accounts of previous queens, legal texts that explained her rights and responsibilities. Mira helped her navigate the social landscape, teaching her which council members could be trusted and which were simply biding their time. Lady Saren became an unexpected ally. The older woman had a sharp tongue and sharper mind, but she was fair. She drilled Kaela on a protocol, on political strategy, on how to command a room without raising her voice. You have natural instincts, Saren told her one afternoon. But instincts aren't enough. You need technique. So Kaela learned technique. She learned how to stand so she looked taller, more imposing, how to modulate her voice for maximum impact, how to read a room and identify allies versus threats in seconds. She learned the difference between yielding and compromising, between showing strength and showing cruelty. And slowly, the fortress began to change around her. Warriors who'd sneered at her weeks ago now nodded respectfully when she passed. Servants who'd whispered behind her back now curtsied. Council members who'd questioned her legitimacy now sought her opinion. The Southern Committee met 3 times, and by the 3rd meeting, Kaela had a concrete proposal. Rotating garrison deployments, resource-sharing agreements, and a new position, Southern Liaison, to coordinate between the capital and border pacts. The council approved it unanimously. "You're a natural," Ronan told her that night. They'd fallen into a routine of spending evenings together, reviewing the day's events, planning for tomorrow. "I knew you would be. You had more faith than I did." Someone had to. He pulled her against him, and she settled into the familiar comfort of his presence. The bond had deepened over these weeks. Where once it had felt like chains, now it felt like roots, anchoring, stabilizing. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow. The coronation." Kaela's stomach fluttered. "No, but I'll do it anyway." That's all anyone can ask. Okay. The day of the coronation dawned clear and cold. Kaela stood in her chamber, staring at the gown laid out on the bed. It was magnificent, deep crimson and gold, embroidered with wolves and stars, heavy with the weight of tradition. The same colors Ronan wore, marking her as his equal. Mira helped her dress, hands steady and sure. The girl had grown bolder over the weeks, more confident. She'd even asked to join Kaela's household staff permanently. "You look like a queen," Mira said, stepping back to admire her work. Kaela looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. The scared, half-starved prisoner was gone. In her place stood someone who looked like she belonged here, someone who looked like she could rule. "I'm terrified," Kaela admitted. "Good. It means you care." Mira handed her a delicate silver circlet. Not a crown yet, but close. "You'll be brilliant." The ceremony took place in the Great Hall, packed with every warrior, servant, and council member in the fortress. They stood in rows, silent and watching as Kaela walked down the center aisle. Ronan waited at the far end, dressed in black and silver, his circlet gleaming. Their eyes met, and through the bond she felt his pride, his love, his absolute certainty that she belonged here. It steadied her. Lady Saren conducted the ceremony, her voice carrying through the hall. "Kaela Thorne, you stand before this assembly to be recognized as queen, not through blood or birthright, but through bond and merit, through sacrifice and service, through the choice to stand when others would run." The words resonated through Kaela's chest. "Do you accept the responsibilities of this crown? To lead justly, protect fiercely, and serve the kingdom above yourself?" Kaela's voice rang out clear and strong. "I do." "Do you swear to uphold the laws of this land, to defend its people, and to rule alongside your mate with wisdom and courage?" "I do." Saren lifted a crown, delicate but strong, silver woven with gold. She placed it on Kaela's head, and the weight of it settled like purpose. "Then by the authority vested in this council, I name you Kaela Thorne Varric, Queen of the Northern Territories, mate to King Ronan, and rightful ruler of these lands." The hall erupted. Warriors pounded fists against chests. Council members bowed. Servants cheered. And Kaela stood there, crowned and acknowledged, no longer a captive or an outsider. A queen. Ronan took her hand, raising it high. "Your queen," he called out, and the hall roared approval. Through the bond, Kaela felt his joy, felt the fortress accepting her finally, completely. But underneath it all, she felt something else. Her own strength, her own power. She'd come here broken and afraid. She'd survived dungeons and politics and assassination attempts. She'd proven herself not just to them, but to herself. And now she would lead. Not as Ronan's shadow, not as a political necessity, as herself. The ceremony concluded, but the celebration continued into the night. Kaela moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations, making promises, cementing alliances. And everywhere she went, people bowed. Not out of fear, out of respect. She'd earned this. Every brutal, impossible piece of it. Later, when the festivities finally wound down, Ronan found her on the same terrace where they'd talked weeks ago. The mountains stretched endlessly under starlight, beautiful and harsh. "How do you feel?" he asked. Kaela considered the question. "Like I can breathe for the first time since I got here." "Good." He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her close. "Because the hard part's just beginning." "I thought survival was the hard part." "Survival was basic. Now comes building, creating, changing this kingdom into something better. Kaela leaned into him, feeling the bond hum between them. We'll do it together. Yes, we will. They stood there in the cold mountain air, two people who'd been forced together and had somehow, impossibly, chosen each other. The future stretched before them, uncertain, dangerous, full of challenges neither could predict, but they'd face it as one, king and queen, mates, partners. And nothing in this brutal world would tear them apart. And nothing in this brutal world would tear them apart. The words hung between them like a vow, and Kaela almost believed it, almost let herself sink into the peace of this moment, standing beside the man who'd become her anchor in this storm of a life. But peace never lasted long in the Northern Territories. A guard appeared at the terrace entrance, breathing hard like he'd run the entire way. "Sire, my queen, you're needed in the throne hall, immediately." The urgency in his voice killed whatever tranquility they'd managed to find. Ronan's jaw tightened. What happened? It's Dristan's trial. The prisoner's demanding to address the court. Now, before the formal proceedings tomorrow. Kaela felt Ronan tense beside her. Through the bond, his frustration crashed over her in waves. They'd had one night, one single night to celebrate before the machinery of governance dragged them back in. "We're coming," Ronan said. They followed the guard through corridors that felt different now. Where once Kaela had walked these halls as a prisoner, now she moved as queen. Warriors saluted as she passed. Servants pressed themselves against walls in deference. The crown on her head felt heavier with each step. The throne hall was already packed when they arrived. Council members stood in clusters, arguing in heated whispers. Warriors lined the walls, hands on weapons. And at the center of it all, chained between two guards, stood Dristan. He looked worse than when they'd dragged him away. Thinner, paler, with the kind of desperation that made dangerous men even more unpredictable. But his eyes, those were still sharp, still calculating. "Brother!" Dristan called out when he saw them. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "And my new sister, how lovely you both look. Did I interrupt the honeymoon?" "Shut him up," one of the guards growled, moving to gag him. "No." Ronan's command stopped everyone cold. He walked toward the throne, not the simple chair he usually used, but the ancient stone seat reserved for formal occasions, for moments that required the full weight of authority. Kaela followed, taking her place in the newly installed throne beside his. Equal height, equal prominence. The message was clear. "You demanded to speak," Ronan said, his voice cutting through the tension. "So speak." Dristan smiled, and it was the smile of a man with nothing left to lose. "I want to make a deal." Murmurs rippled through the hall. Lady Saren stepped forward, her face carved from stone. "You have no position to negotiate from. You attempted regicide. The penalty is death." "Is it, though?" Dristan's gaze swept the room. "Because I'm not the only one who questioned dear Ronan's fitness to rule. I just had the courage to act on it." "Courage?" Kaela couldn't stop herself. "You stabbed at his back while he wasn't looking. That's not courage. That's cowardice," says the girl who was a prisoner a month ago. Dristan's attention focused on her with laser precision. "Tell me, Your Majesty, do you really think you belong here, or are you just playing dress-up in a crown you never earned?" The words were designed to hurt, to undermine, to make her doubt herself in front of the entire court. A month ago, they might have worked. But Kaela had survived too much to be wounded by a condemned man's insults. "I earned this crown by surviving everything you and your allies threw at me," she said, her voice steady and cold. "I earned it by standing when everyone expected me to break. I earned it by protecting the king you tried to murder. So yes, Dristan, I think I belong here. The real question is whether you ever did." Silence crashed through the hall. Even Dristan seemed momentarily stunned by the steel in her voice. Ronan's hand found hers, squeezing once. Through the bond, she felt his fierce pride. "You wanted to make a deal," Ronan said. "What are you offering?" "Information." Dristan straightened as much as his chains would allow. "I wasn't working alone. You already know that. But what you don't know is how deep the conspiracy goes. How many are still plotting against you? How many are waiting for the right moment to strike? We've already identified your supporters, Lady Saren said dismissively. They're being exiled as we speak. You've identified the obvious ones, the warriors stupid enough to declare their loyalty openly. Dristan's smile widened. But what about the ones who stayed quiet? The council members who nodded and smiled while secretly funding my challenge. The merchants who promised resources. The neighboring territories who were ready to invade the moment I took the throne. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. You're lying, one of the council members said, but his voice wavered. Am I? Or am I the only one honest enough to admit that half this court wanted Ronan dead? Dristan's gaze swept the assembled nobles and warriors. Go ahead. Look around. See who's avoiding eye contact. Who's suddenly very interested in the floor. Kaela watched the room's dynamics shift, saw warriors exchange glances, saw council members shift uncomfortably, saw the seeds of paranoia take root. This was what Dristan wanted. Even in chains, even facing execution, he was trying to destabilize everything. Enough, Ronan said, his voice cutting through the growing unease. Name names, or this conversation is over. Oh, I'll name names, but first I want immunity. The hall erupted. Absolutely not. Saren's voice rose above the chaos. You attempted to kill the king, and if you execute me, you'll never know who else is planning the same thing. Dristan looked directly at Ronan. Your choice, brother. Kill me and sleep with one eye open for the rest of your life. Or let me live, and I'll give you every traitor in this fortress. Kaela felt Ronan's rage through the bond, felt his desire to end this threat permanently, but underneath that she felt something else. Calculation. Strategy. He was actually considering it. No, Kaela said quietly, just loud enough for Ronan to hear. Don't do this. If he's telling the truth, he's manipulating you. That's what he does. She leaned closer, lowering her voice further. You give him immunity. You show everyone that consequences don't matter if you have information to trade. You undermine every law you've tried to build. And if there really are other conspirators, then we find them another way. Through investigation, through the council, through proper channels. Kaela met his eyes. You can't compromise on this. Not for him. She felt his internal struggle through the bond. The king in him knew she was right, but the man who'd survived assassination attempts and political betrayals wanted the security Dristan offered. Lady Saren was watching them closely, reading the silent conversation. Finally, Ronan turned back to Dristan. No immunity. But if you provide information that leads to verified conspirators, I'll commute your sentence from execution to permanent exile. You leave tonight. You never return. And if you ever set foot in my territories again, the original sentence stands. But, that's the offer. Take it or face the headsman tomorrow. Dristan's face twisted with fury. He'd gambled everything on immunity, on walking away completely free. Exile was better than death, but it wasn't the victory he'd wanted. You're making a mistake, he hissed. Probably. But it's my mistake to make. Ronan gestured to the guards. You have until dawn to decide. Guards, return him to his cell. They dragged Dristan away, still shouting threats and promises, still trying to sow chaos even as they removed him from the hall. When the doors closed behind him, Ronan stood and addressed the court. If anyone in this hall has knowledge of conspiracy or treason, you have 24 hours to come forward voluntarily. After that, we investigate. And anyone we find who stayed silent. He let the threat hang. The message was clear. Confess now, face lesser consequences. Get caught later, face the full weight of justice. The court dispersed slowly, everyone eyeing everyone else with new suspicion. Kaela and Ronan remained on their thrones until the last person left. You think anyone will come forward? Kaela asked. Maybe. Fear is a powerful motivator. Ronan rubbed his face, exhaustion finally showing through the kingly facade. You were right earlier, about not giving him immunity. I know. Confident tonight, aren't we? I'm learning from the best. She stood, moving to stand in front of him. But Ronan, what if he was telling the truth? What if there are others? Then we deal with them, together. He pulled her onto his lap, mindful of both their formal attire. I'm tired of living in fear, tired of seeing threats everywhere. At some point, we have to trust that what we've built is strong enough to withstand whatever comes. And if it's not, then we build it stronger. Through the bond, Kaela felt his determination, his refusal to let fear rule him anymore. It was contagious, that strength. It made her believe things might actually work out. "Come on," Ronan said, standing and setting her on her feet. "Let's get out of here before someone else needs us." They escaped to his chambers, shedding crowns and formal wear for something more comfortable. Kaela had moved most of her things here over the past week. It had happened gradually, a few items at a time, until she realized she was spending more nights in his bed than her own. The bond made separation uncomfortable. Not painful like before, but enough to notice, enough to prefer proximity. "I've been thinking," Ronan said, pouring them both wine from a crystal decanter, "about your Southern Committee proposal. What about it? I want you to lead the first delegation. Go south, meet with the packs, implement the garrison rotation yourself." Kaela nearly dropped her glass. "You want me to leave the fortress?" "I want you to be more than a symbol. You know those territories? You understand their struggles. They'll listen to you in ways they'd never listen to me. They'll see me as the girl who abandoned them to marry the Northern King. Maybe at first, but you'll prove them wrong. Same way you proved everyone here wrong." He handed her the wine. "I'm not saying it'll be easy, but nothing worth doing is." Kaela sipped the wine, her mind already racing through logistics. A southern tour, meeting with packs she'd grown up hearing about, implementing real change, not just proposing it in council meetings. It was terrifying. It was exactly what she needed to do. "When?" she asked. "After Drystan's situation is resolved, after we're sure the fortress is secure." Ronan sat beside her on the couch. "But soon, before winter makes travel impossible. That gives us maybe 3 weeks. Then we have 3 weeks to prepare." They sat in comfortable silence, planning and dreaming about a future that was slowly becoming real. About a kingdom they could build together, about proving that strength didn't have to mean cruelty, and leadership didn't have to mean isolation. Around midnight, a knock interrupted their planning. Mira stood outside, her face pale. "Your Majesties, one of the council members is here. He says he has information about the conspiracy." Ronan and Kaela exchanged glances. It had begun. Over the next 3 days, 7 people came forward, 4 council members, 2 merchants, 1 high-ranking warrior. Each confessed to varying levels of involvement, from simply knowing about Drystan's plans to actively funding his challenge. None had participated in the assassination attempt, but all had hoped it would succeed. The interrogations were brutal. Lady Saren conducted them personally, extracting every detail with surgical precision. Kaela sat in on all of them, watching and learning. "Why did you support him?" she asked one of the council members, an older man named Garrett, who'd always seemed reasonable in meetings. "Because the king is too harsh," Garrett said, not meeting her eyes. "Too focused on expansion and law. He's forgotten that people need mercy sometimes." "And you thought Drystan would provide that?" "I thought he'd be more flexible, more willing to compromise." "He tried to stab Ronan in the back during a formal challenge," Kaela said flatly. "Does that sound like someone interested in mercy and compromise?" Garrett had no answer. In the end, Ronan stripped the conspirators of their positions but stopped short of execution. Exile for the worst offenders, demotion and heavy fines for the others, public acknowledgement of their crimes. "You're being too lenient," Lady Saren argued after the last judgment was delivered. "They plotted against you. They plotted against a king they saw as tyrannical," Ronan countered, "and maybe they had a point. Maybe I have been too harsh, too focused on control at the expense of compassion. You're second-guessing yourself." "I'm learning." He glanced at Kaela. "From people who see things I miss." Saren followed his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, she nodded. Perhaps that's what the kingdom needed. Balance. The conspirators were exiled within the week. Kaela watched them leave from the same terrace where she'd stood with Ronan that first night. Watched them disappear into the forest with nothing but what they could carry. It could have been her. If things had gone differently, if Ronan had been killed, if Drystan had won, She'd have been one of those figures trudging through the snow into exile. Or worse. Having second thoughts? Ronan appeared beside her, wrapping a fur cloak around her shoulders against the cold, just remembering how close we came to losing everything. But we didn't. We're still here. He turned her to face him. And tomorrow, we deal with Dristan once and for all. Tomorrow, the formal trial, the final judgment. Kaela had tried not to think about it, tried not to imagine what it would feel like to watch Ronan sentence his own brother to permanent exile, to sever that family bond completely. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No, but I'll do it anyway." He kissed her forehead. "That seems to be our approach to everything lately. It's worked so far." "Barely." They stood together, watching night fall over the mountains. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own pain. But tonight, they had each other. That had to be enough. To some. The trial was held in the throne hall, packed even fuller than before. Everyone wanted to see how this ended, wanted to witness the final chapter of a power struggle that had consumed the fortress for weeks. Dristan was brought in chains, and Kaela saw immediately that something had changed. The desperation was gone, replaced by cold resignation. He'd accepted what was coming. "Dristan Varric," Lady Saren's voice rang out formal and final. "You stand accused of attempted regicide, violation of challenge law, and conspiracy to commit treason. How do you plead?" "Guilty." No hesitation, no attempt to bargain. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Saren continued, "The evidence against you is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses, physical evidence, your own confession. The council has voted unanimously. The sentence is permanent exile to be carried out immediately. You will be stripped of your name, your titles, and your claim to these territories. You will leave with nothing, and should you ever return, you will face execution. Do you understand?" "I understand." Dristan looked at Ronan for the first time. "I understand that my brother has become exactly what he feared. A tyrant hiding behind laws and pretty speeches. I'm showing you mercy," Ronan said, his voice level despite the anger Kaela felt through the bond. "Something you never would have shown me." "Mercy?" Dristan laughed bitterly. "You're sending me to die in the wilderness in winter. That's not mercy. That's cowardice. You don't have the spine to execute me properly, so you're letting the cold do it for you. Then survive. Prove you're stronger than I think you are." Ronan stood, descending from the throne to stand eye level with his brother. "You wanted this kingdom so badly. Go build your own, somewhere far from here. And maybe, if you manage it, you'll understand what leadership actually costs." For a moment, genuine emotion flickered across Dristan's face, something that might have been regret or respect. Then it was gone, locked behind that familiar sneer. "I have one request," Dristan said. "You're in no position to request anything. Let me speak to the Queen, privately, just for a moment." Every muscle in Ronan's body went tense. "Absolutely not." "I'm not going to hurt her. I'm in chains, surrounded by guards." Dristan's gaze shifted to Kaela. "Please, 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Kaela should have refused, should have let them drag him away without another word. But curiosity gnawed at her. What could he possibly want to say? "I'll do it," she said. "Kaela, 5 minutes, in this hall, with guards present." She looked at Ronan. "Let me do this." She felt his resistance through the bond, his fear for her safety, even with Dristan in chains, but also his trust in her judgment. 5 minutes, Ronan said finally. "And if he so much as looks at you wrong, I'm ending this." They cleared the hall, except for guards lining the walls. Kaela approached Dristan, stopping just out of reach. "Well?" she said. "What do you want?" Dristan studied her for a long moment. "I underestimated you." "Yes, you did. I thought you were just a tool he'd use and discard, another political maneuver." He shook his head slowly. "I was wrong. You're actually changing him, making him softer. If by softer you mean more human, then yes. That's not a compliment in this world. Maybe it should be." Kaela crossed her arms. "Is that all? You wanted to tell me you were wrong about me?" "No, I wanted to warn you." Dristan leaned forward as much as his chains allowed. The northern territories are brutal, unforgiving, built on blood and violence because that's the only language this world understands. You can try to change it, try to make it gentler, but eventually it'll break you. And when it does, you'll understand why Ronan became what he is. He's not what you think he is. Isn't he? Give it time. Dristan's smile was sad and knowing. Give it a few years of impossible choices and political betrayals. A few assassinations, a few wars, a few moments where mercy gets you killed. And then tell me if you still see him the same way. The words burrowed under her skin, finding her own hidden doubts. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, you tried to save his life. You stood between him and my blade. Dristan's expression softened. That's either the bravest or stupidest thing I've ever seen, and I wanted you to know what you're fighting for, what you're going to become. I'm not becoming anything except what I choose. Everyone thinks that. No one's right. He straightened. I'm done. Thank you for listening. Guards moved forward to take him away. Dristan, Kaela called out. He paused, looking back. Survive, she said. Prove that exile isn't execution. Prove that there's life beyond this fortress and this crown. Because if you can do that... She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Understanding flickered in his eyes. If I can do that, maybe you can too, when it all becomes too much. He was gone before she could respond. Ronan appeared at her side immediately. What did he say? Nothing important? The lie came easily. Some conversations weren't meant to be shared, but later, alone in their chambers, the words haunted her. Eventually, it'll break you. Kaela stood at the window, watching snow fall over the mountains. Somewhere out there, Dristan was walking into exile, walking toward either death or freedom, depending on his strength and luck. And she was here, wearing a crown that felt heavier with each passing day. You're thinking too loud, Say, Ronan said from the bed. I can feel it through the bond, just processing. Whatever he said to you, I know. Kaela turned to face him. He tried to plant doubt, tried to make me question everything. It's what he does. Did it work? Honesty made her pause. A little. Ronan sat up, patting the bed beside him. Kaela crossed the room and settled into his arms. This world is brutal, he said quietly. Dristan wasn't wrong about that. It will test you, break you if it can, and there will be moments when you wonder if any of this is worth it. Comforting. I'm not trying to comfort you. I'm trying to prepare you. He tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. But here's what Dristan doesn't understand. The brutality doesn't have to win. We can be strong without being cruel. We can survive without becoming monsters. It's harder, yes, but it's possible. You really believe that? I have to, because the alternative is becoming exactly what he thinks I am. Kaela kissed him then, pouring every fear and hope and desperate wish for the future into it. The bond flared between them, bright and warm, and she felt his absolute determination to prove his brother wrong, to build something better, together. 3 weeks later, Kaela stood at the gates of her childhood pack's territory. The journey south had taken longer than expected. Winter storms, difficult terrain, the sheer logistics of moving a delegation through hostile territory. But they'd made it. And now, standing here, Kaela felt the weight of everything that had changed. She'd left this place as a nobody, a forgotten Omega from a border pack that barely registered on the kingdom's maps. She was returning as queen. The pack's alpha, a grizzled man named Marcus, who'd known her father, approached slowly. Kaela saw the conflict on his face. The disbelief that the girl he'd dismissed years ago was now wearing a crown. Kaela Thorne, he said carefully. Or should I say, Queen Kaela. Just Kaela is fine. She dismounted, gesturing for her guards to stay back. Marcus, it's good to see you. Is it? He looked past her at the warriors, the resources, the visible display of power she'd brought with her. We heard rumors that you'd been taken, that you'd married the Northern King. We thought... He trailed off. You thought I was dead. Or worse. Kaela smiled without humor. I know. I would have thought the same. And now you're here, with an army. Not an army, a garrison rotation. Protection. She pulled out the documents she'd prepared. I'm here to make good on a promise, to provide the support border packs should have had all along. Marcus took the documents but didn't read them, just stared at her like she was a ghost. Why? Why would you help us after we abandoned you? The question landed like a punch. Kaela had asked herself the same thing during the journey south. Why was she helping people who'd watched her get taken and done nothing? Who'd written her off as collateral damage? Because I remember what it felt like to be powerless, she said finally, to need help that never came. And because someone needs to break the cycle of abandonment and neglect. Might as well be me. Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Respect, maybe, or shame. We don't deserve your help. Probably not, but the children growing up here do. The families trying to survive do. They shouldn't suffer because the adults failed. Kaela held out her hand. So, are you going to accept, or should I take my garrison rotation to the next pack over? Marcus looked at her hand for a long moment. Then slowly, he took it. We accept. And thank you. Over the next week, Kaela implemented her plan across 5 southern packs. Garrison rotations, resource sharing, training programs, everything she'd proposed to the council, made real. And everywhere she went, the reaction was the same. Shock, disbelief, grudging respect. The forgotten Omega had become a queen who remembered where she came from. On the last night before returning north, Kaela stood at the edge of the forest where she'd grown up. The trees looked smaller now, less intimidating. Or maybe she'd just grown. Mira approached quietly. The delegation is ready to leave at dawn. Good. I'm ready to go home. Home. When had the fortress become home? Somewhere between survival and acceptance, between fear and love, between captivity and choice. You did an incredible thing here, Mira said softly. Changed lives. Changed how people see the crown. I just did what needed doing. That's what leaders say. Mira smiled. You're good at this, being queen. Kaela wanted to deny it. Wanted to say she was still figuring it out, still terrified of failing. But maybe that was what leadership was. Doing the work despite the fear, making choices that mattered, refusing to let the brutality win. Come on, she said to Mira. Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow we go home. Ronan was waiting when they returned. Kaela saw him from a distance, standing on the fortress walls, watching the road. When he spotted their party, she felt his relief crash through the bond like a wave. He met them at the gates, and propriety be damned, he pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone. I missed you, he murmured into her hair. It was only 2 weeks. 2 weeks too long. They separated reluctantly, aware of the watching eyes. But the bond hummed between them, content now that they were close again. How did it go? Ronan asked as they walked toward the throne hall. Better than expected. All 5 packs accepted the garrison rotation. Some were more enthusiastic than others, but they all agreed. And how were you received? Kaela considered the question. Like a ghost at first, then like a curiosity. By the end, she smiled, by the end, like a queen who'd earned her crown. Pride surged through the bond. I knew you would. You had more faith than I did. Someone had to. They entered the throne hall and Kaela stopped dead. The room had been transformed. Banners hung from the ceiling, not just northern colors, but southern ones too, representing every pack she'd visited, every territory she'd helped. The council stood assembled, along with what looked like half the fortress. What is this? Kaela asked. Lady Saren stepped forward. A celebration, to honor the Queen's successful diplomatic mission. The first of many, we hope. Kaela's throat tightened. They'd done this for her. Acknowledged not just her title, but her work, her impact. I don't know what to say, she managed. Then don't say anything. Saren's stern expression softened into something almost warm. Just accept that you've earned this, all of it. The celebration that followed was unlike the coronation. Less formal, more genuine. Warriors came up to congratulate her. Council members praised her strategy. Even servants smiled as they served food and drink. Kaela moved through it in a daze, still processing that this was real, that she'd gone from prisoner to this in a matter of months. Late in the evening, she found herself back on that familiar terrace, the same place she'd stood with Ronan so many times, planning and worrying and slowly falling in love. "There you are," Ronan said, joining her with 2 glasses of wine. "Hiding from your own party? Just taking a breath, it's a lot." "It is, but you handled it perfectly." He handed her a glass. "To the queen who changed everything." Kaela clinked her glass against his. "I didn't change everything. I just adjusted some things." "You're too modest, and you're too generous with praise." They stood in comfortable silence, looking out over the kingdom they were building together. The mountains still looked brutal and unforgiving. The winter still looked deadly. But somehow, it felt less hopeless than before. "Dristan was wrong, you know," Kaela said quietly. "About what?" "He said this world would break me, that eventually I'd become as hard as everyone else." She looked at Ronan, "But I don't think that's true. I think we get to choose who we become, what we let this world make us." "And what are you choosing?" Kaela thought about the question, about the girl who'd woken in chains and the woman wearing a crown, about everything she'd survived and everything she'd built. "I'm choosing strength without cruelty, power without tyranny. I'm choosing to remember where I came from while building something better." She met his eyes. "I'm choosing you, every day. Not because the bond forces me to, but because I want to." Ronan's expression crumbled. He set down his glass and pulled her close, and through the bond, Kaela felt the depth of his love, his gratitude, his absolute commitment to being worthy of her choice. "I love you," he said. "I know I don't say it enough, but I do. More than I thought possible." "I love you too." The words came easily now, honestly. Even when you're impossible and stubborn and too harsh on yourself. "We're quite a pair." "We are." They stood together under the stars, 2 people who'd been forced together by fate and had chosen to make it work, who'd taken an impossible situation and turned it into something real. Below them, the fortress settled into evening routines. Guards changed shifts, servants finished their work, warriors returned from training, a kingdom functioning, growing, changing. And at the heart of it, 2 people who'd proven that strength didn't have to mean isolation, that power could be tempered with compassion, that love could bloom even in the harshest soil. "What's next?" Kaela asked. "More diplomatic missions? More challenges? More people who'll question us?" Ronan smiled. "The usual." "Sounds terrible." "It probably will be." "Good thing we're in it together then." "Good thing indeed." The bond pulsed between them, warm and steady and unbreakable. Not a chain anymore, not a prison, a foundation, a partnership, a choice they'd both made and would keep making every single day. Kaela Thorne had woken in chains, starving and forgotten, preparing to die. Queen Kaela Varric stood on a terrace overlooking her kingdom, powerful and loved, ready to live. The journey between those 2 women had nearly destroyed her, had tested every limit she thought she had demanded more courage, more strength, more ruthless determination than she'd known existed. But she'd survived, more than survived. She'd conquered, not through violence or cruelty or becoming the monster this world expected, but through stubbornness, through refusing to break, through finding strength in the most unexpected place, in a bond she'd never wanted with the man she'd been taught to fear. And now, standing beside the Alpha King under a sky full of stars, wearing a crown she'd earned through blood and tears and sheer unwillingness to quit, Kaela finally understood what it meant to reclaim power. It wasn't about dominating others. It wasn't about never showing weakness. It was about choosing who you became in the face of impossible odds, about refusing to let brutality win, about building something better, even when everyone said it was impossible. She'd been a captive. Now she was a queen, and she was just getting started,